Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take a look at the Matlab IDE, or Integrated Development Environment. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on the Matlab programming language, as well as how to use the Matlab IDE. Now, in this particular video, I'm just going to go through sort of an overview. This assumes that you really haven't had much exposure to MATLAB or to the MATLAB IDE. And even if you have, hopefully you'll pick up some new tricks as we go along. And so to begin with, I just want to start off with what you should see when you first launch MATLAB. And you can see here that basically I've just got an empty shell. I don't have any files open or anything along those lines. And what we're going to do is we're just going to walk our way around the interface so that you can get familiar with some of the basic features in the MATLAB IDE. And again, I'm going to go deeper in other videos, and especially as we start looking at other concepts, perhaps take a look at some of the features in, for instance, the graphical user interface development environment or the app developer, as well as the workspace and so on. But let's get started. So the first thing you'll notice is that we have this command window here. Basically what this does is this allows for us to use MATLAB as a glorified calculator, meaning that we can just simply come along and we can do things like 1 + 1, and sure enough, MATLAB will tell us that it's 2. And you can also do things like assign variables, much like you can do in many other programming languages. So in this case, I'm going to say A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2. And then instead of adding the numbers together, I can simply add the variables together. And likewise, I can go ahead and assign that result to a new variable. Now, again, I am presuming that this is your first exposure to MATLAB and possibly to programming in general. So we're going to touch on all of these topics in later videos, but effectively, I want to get you on board as quick as possible. So the first thing you'll notice is over on the right-hand side, as I did all of these operations, that I suddenly started filling up this thing called a workspace. And essentially the workspace you can think of as the place in memory where these variables are being stored. And we'll talk a little bit about the value and the type of variables again in later videos, but you can see here that I have my variable A, which had a value of 1, my variable B, a value of 2, and my variable C as a value of 3. And you can click on any of these variables, and technically speaking, you can, in certain instances, modify them as well, should you find the need to do so interactively. So in this case, I've now set the value of A equal to 3. You'll see I've got this little variable editor here. I can even add additional values. When we start talking about vectors and arrays, this will start making a lot more sense. But I'm going to go ahead and close this. You'll notice that now A is 3. And if I were to come down here to the command window and simply type in A, it would essentially parrot back to me the value that I have in the workspace. Now, continuing our way around here on the left-hand side, you'll see a series of folders. Basically, that corresponds to where you land in the file system. In other words, where did MATLAB launch? And in this particular case, you'll see that I launched MATLAB, and I've already changed the directory to this YouTube folder where I create all of my YouTube content for MATLAB. And you can see here that I have the same subfolders in Explorer as I do in the current folder. Likewise, you can see that we have this path, the current path on top. This address bar, if you would, also tells you where you are in the file system. In some cases, you'll discover scenarios where the current folder and the path aren't necessarily the same, or rather, I should say the path to a script or the path to a file is not the same as the current folder. Again, we're going to look at those more sophisticated examples later on. So let's go ahead and take a look at now how we can work with MATLAB scripts. But before we do that, let's go ahead and clear not only the workspace, but also the command window. And in order to clear the workspace, you simply type in clear in the command window. Notice that all the variables that were in the workspace are now gone. And likewise, from the command window, we can also type in CLC and clear the command window. Now, that does not get rid of the history or anything like that. As a matter of fact, we'll see there are ways that you can go through and see what commands you have recently run. You've also got the ability to right-click and do the same operation here. You can clear the command window, as well as clear the workspace. Now, what you will notice is in most of my MATLAB videos, I generally do not use the right-click menu. So if anything, it's good to get comfortable using these functions from the command window. Now, if you come up here, you've got a couple of options. You'll notice there is this ribbon bar that changes based on which tab you have clicked on. We're going to stay primarily in the Home tab and in just a second in the Editor tab. But we're going to start off by creating a new script. And again, you've got a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this. You can again go back to the Home tab. You can select New Script. We'll talk a little later about live scripts, basically, that allows for you to have a little more control in updating your script as you add MATLAB code to it. And then you've also got the ability to create a new script in this drop-down menu, as well as the live script and some other features as well that we will take a look at in later videos. But now you'll notice that we have a different set of options now. Specifically, we now have additional tabs for an editor, for publish, and for view. And we're going to focus mainly on the editor tab here, in that you'll notice that, again, we have a set of features or set of buttons associated with a MATLAB script. And again, this is where that context menu approach comes into play. Basically, what you are doing in MATLAB controls which features are available in the menu. So we'll start off, we'll do the exact same thing that we did in the command window. We'll type in A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2, and C is equal to A plus B. And you'll notice that nothing has happened. Well, that's because this script allows for you to write multiple lines of MATLAB code without necessarily running them interactively. And so in order to be able to run the lines of code in a MATLAB script, we've got a couple of different ways that we can go about doing this. The first thing that you can do is simply highlight a line of code, right-click, and evaluate the selection in the command window. And you can essentially think of this as doing nothing more than copying and pasting the line of code into the command window. You can also hit the F9 key, or if you're on some laptops, your function F9 key to accomplish the exact same thing. And you'll notice that basically what happened is it copied the line of code into the command window, and we get the same result that we got earlier in the workspace, where we have now assigned A equal to 1. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the next two lines just to show you that you can do multiple lines here. In this case, basically, again, it just simply copied all of those values, or all of those lines of code rather, into the command window and simply ran them one at a time. And sure enough, we have our value for B as well as the value for C. Now, that's good, and that's probably going to be the way that you're going to use MATLAB a lot, especially when you're first starting off. But there is another way to go about doing this, and this involves simply running the entire script. So before we do this, let's go ahead and clear our workspace. We're going to go ahead and clear the console or the command window one more time. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run the script. And what we've got here is the ability to just simply run it. And it'll prompt you to save the file. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this in my fundamentals folder directory. And there is, or rather, my fundamentals folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this one sample_01. Not the most creative file name here, but it gets us started. And we hit enter. We'll talk a little bit about the rules for naming files and variables in a later video, but you'll immediately get prompted to ask whether or not you want to change folder to the folder that we saved that file in. Now, you probably wonder why I didn't just save the file in the base YouTube folder. Well, that was kind of intentional. I wanted us to trigger this prompt so we could talk a little bit about the folder structure. Again, we'll cover this in depth in later videos, but fundamentally, MATLAB needs to know where your file is in order to be able to run it. And you've got a couple of options here. You can simply select change folder, which will then go into the folder that the file sits in. You've got the possibility to add to the path and then, of course, cancel and then help. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the folder. Now we'll come back to add to path later on in a later video. I would encourage you to use that one very sparingly because that can get confusing. But for right now, you simply change folder whenever you are prompted. You'll notice that the current folder now has changed over on the left-hand side. You'll also notice that my workspace is populated again with the variables. And effectively what it's done is it has run all of the lines of code in your Matlab script. Again, just to see that in action, we're going to go ahead and clear the workspace. We're going to clear the command window. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to run the entire script. Now, there are a couple of other ways that you can go about running a Matlab script, but again, we will cover that in later videos. This video is just intended to get us off the ground as quickly as possible with writing some useful Matlab code. So hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.